Well, we're back at Pioneer Women's Park, and we're going to continue our exploration. This is a popular place where people like to walk their dogs. Beautiful fall colors, yellow. It's November the 20th, 2023.
It's about 67 degrees today here in Las Cruces.
There's another beautiful fall colored tree in yellow.
This is the house that I like the most here in Pioneer Park, or Women's Pioneer Park. This is the one side of that Victorian house that I like. It's got the wraparound porch and it's got glass on the windows. This house has a garage, two-car garage access on one side. This district has both Victorian houses built in the late 1800s and also the old adobe style of New Mexico homes. And here with the buildings, you can see the low structure of the windows. It's actually only maybe 1.5 feet from the sidewalk. Here's a pan of the close-up of those windows. It's a very old adobe structure, and here you can see the thick walls of the adobe. It's about 18 inches in thickness here, and the panes are very close together, and it is also curved in structure. Here's the half moon, and we are here at the Women's Pioneer Park. We are in Las Cruces today, New Mexico.
This is typical of the architecture in this neighborhood. Look how this fence is made. You can tell it's pretty old. There's a view of the First Baptist Church, which is only 1 block away from the park. And here's a view of the street leading back to the park.
And here's a cactus garden where the adobe houses are also located. It's interesting, and they do have walls in here as well that's of adobe.
Lots of nice cactus in this fellow's yard. If this won't keep you from climbing the fence and going into the yard, nothing will. Look at the entranceway to this fellow's yard. Gate, typical adobe house structure. Now here's something unique about Las Cruces and probably many other desert communities. We don't have a lot of sewer systems, but we do have pooling areas where water runs off the parking lots and streets into the pooling areas, such as the example shown. Now here's an old home with a green roof that reminds me of Ironton, Ohio. My grandmother's home had a green roof on it as well. What I find interesting about this neighborhood is the tree-lined streets.
Walking distance from the park is this old railroad depot we're in right now.
Here's the city of Las Cruces Railroad Depot. The Santa Fe Railroad Depot, 1910. National Register.
This depot is open, so we're gonna go in to see what's inside. This one says Las Cruces Railroad Museum, and it also says that it is affiliated with the Smithsonian Institution Affiliations Program. Here's the entrance of the museum.
We're inside the Railroad Museum right now.
Okay, we're at the Las Cruces Railroad Depot, and this depot was in operation from 1881 to 1910. Okay, Theodore Roosevelt actually visited here in Las Cruces, and here's a plaque of his historic visit here. The glare of this camera and the lighting probably won't show him, but here's a photo of Theodore Roosevelt in the railroad depot. At that time, he was a colonel. It says in here, Colonel Roosevelt.
Check out the floor. The way it's tiled with railroad tracks.
By the way, there's another part of this museum, the other side, Chip. So you can go into, so you can go around, get the museum. We're inside the railroad museum right now. So this is the house I like, Chip. House I like, and it's called a Tudor Revival home built in 1907, 1910. This is at the corner of Miranda and Las Cruces Avenue. This is the one I like the most. That was a historic house, 1907.
Check out the seats they give you here. Pretty neat. This is a rotating locomotive headlight. The patent for this headlight was made in 1931. Look how this train depot looked like many, many years ago. The old horse and buggies and the steam locomotive. Here's what the railroad lights used to look like back in its day. And some railroad tools. Shows the spikes and the spring. Here's some of the tools the railroad personnel used. Hand drills, hand saws, spikes, etc.
This is kind of funny because my father still used this. I remembered as a kid, and this looks like my own father's toolbox, in which the majority of his tools were bought from Sears, and there were craftsman tools, and this resembles a collection of the one he had in his toolboxes.
Christine Gonzalez was the first female railroad engineer for or they called them hoghead, for the Santa Fe Railroad, and in the United States as a fourth generation railroad. As a fourth generation railroader. Here's an old railroad scale that they used to weigh things with. And here's an old chest that belonged to Miranda May, I believe. Miranda May, 1876 to 1951.
Here's a close-up of a trunk, a travel trunk. I remembered my folks having one of these, and I believe that one belonged to my grandfather.
Here's a telegraph sender used to send the telegraphs. And this particular device shows how to send a code in Morse code. And here's the receiving end for the Morse code transmitter.
Here are displays of miniature trains in the railroad depot.
I used to have one of these trains when I was a kid, and it also ran on a 3-rail track. But look at the locomotive. And there's the caboose. This is quite a toy train setup here. Pretty cool. Never had anything set up like this when I was a kid. Look at these different toy trains here. HO scale, I believe. And here's some more. Wow, yeah. It looks like a miniature of the city of Las Cruces almost. Although judging by that water tower way over there, I'd say, no, it's not Las Cruces, but it's a nice setup. I'm glad they have things like this for us to view. It's quite interesting. There's the water tower. Well, it looks like I am mistaken. This is the Las Cruces
Back then.
train depot back then. And that's the old church right there. Well, I'd say Las Cruces has grown some and shrunk some. Here's an example of one of the more modern railroad cars. Trains, I should say, passenger trains, HO scale. And here's a display showing the different gauges of railroad cars. G gauge, O gauge, S scale, HO scale, which is what I had as a kid, N scale, and Z scale.
Here's a stained glass that depicts a railroad train. It looks really nice. It's very high, I'd say about maybe 6 feet.
This looks like an old furnace or an old boiler. Can't tell for sure. Maybe that's what they shoveled coal in on the steam locomotives.
This looks like the old hallway for the depot.
We're heading to a different part of the museum right now. Look at the pictures of the railroad workers. Tired as dogs and working their heart out. And here's a steam whistle that they used on the steam locomotive. Here's some desk implements for the office worker.
We had one that got stolen this year. That was original, was even...
Here's an old Remington typewriter that was used here. And here's some of the type that was used before. So this is those metal type of typewriter. I learned, by the way, how to type using this type of typewriter that my father used to own.
An old-fashioned hand typewriter. No electric keys on this, no autocorrect.
It's a Remington, yeah. I learned how to type on these typewriters.
It's got the same key configuration as the modern computers and typewriters of today. Here's one of the old safes they had back in those days. Pretty darn secure, wouldn't you? I'd say so. This is a teletype machine. 1944. I'm sure it was used during World War II. Here's some different hand signals that a railroad man would use to control the train movements and as to what the train should be doing. Here's a torpedo signal box, and if you're wondering what that is, let's take a look. Railroad workers needed a way to warn oncoming trains about problems ahead of them on the track. Before radio communications, flagmen used torpedoes and red flags to signal trouble. Flagmen stopped the trains, placed torpedoes up to 2 miles away on the rails. The torpedoes contained detonating powder, which emitted a loud bang under the wheels of oncoming trains. And here's a lantern, and what the colors meant. Red meant stop, yellow proceed with caution, green proceed, blue when workmen required equipment. They lit blue lanterns to indicate that the cars or engines shouldn't be moved. And here's some of the things they used to sell at the railroad station. And what caught my interest is the forbidden cigarettes. Forbidden in today's time, huh? sure used to sell them back then. Look at the oiling can. All metal and a long spout. And here's the light that they use to signal the trains as to what they should be doing while in transit. Said the telegraph needed a steady supply of electricity. And this is a wet cell battery that did the job. And the good old glass insulator that they ran the wires down with, or hung the wires up with. Look at the old filing cabinets. They didn't have hard drives to store data on, so they used filing cabinets. And here's what the railroad station looked like back in its day. This railroad station even had a lunchroom called the Harvey House Lunchroom. More seats for the guest. This whole building is historic. The things in it and the building itself. Look at the bricks. It shows where they're made. Orville, VB. Look at the architecture of the building. How the roof is held up in the soffit area. Here's one of the shrubs outside the Railroad Museum. Beautiful red. Definitely fall in Las Cruces. Our tour continues as we move away from the Railroad Museum. Here's a real authentic caboose outside the railroad station. These used to be on all the trains, even when I was a kid, but you don't see them anymore. This caboose was originally put in service in 1890 and was purchased for $50. And now it's here at the museum, the Railroad Museum in Las Cruces. But imagine that. Put into service in 1890. Look at the wheels on this. Definitely made to carry a heavy load. Although the springs here resemble the springs I saw inside the museum. If you look closely, you can see the brake system on the train. It just simply pushed against the wheels. I guess not exactly disc brakes, but quite effective, I'm sure. And here's how you get up into the caboose. Set of ladders. Of course, I wanted you to know that the story will continue on the Railroad Museum. It was closing when we were in there for only 15 minutes, and we do intend to return. Here's a little pretty house right across from the Railroad Museum. Here's a Mini Cooper parked on the street with Maryland plates on it. Here's a home for sale by the owner. Here's a house for y'all to buy. As they'd say in Texas, y'all, if you're interested in living in Las Cruces, near the train depot. Here's an unusual home. It's built out of rock, stone. You don't see many of these. And here's another home with cedar wood shingles. Unusual. Hey, look, a neighborhood kitty cat. Yeah, he's a pretty one, isn't he? A pretty kitty and very friendly. Look how this tree glistens in the sunshine. Isn't that pretty?
Here's another house that's somewhat Victorian in structure. It's got a new tin roof and it looks old as well.
There must be 100 birds in that Italian cypress up there.
Adobe houses such as this one also incorporates into this district. I'm gonna take a close-up of this adobe house. It's quite expansive. It goes to the back. And this looks like either a storage part of the house or it's another residence. And here's the front of that adobe house. I like the structure. And here's an addition from the looks of it. We're in a highly traveled road. I just saw a bus passing through. This looks like a separate apartment, and there's another door in here. Beware of dog, it says. So there's several residences in this one property. Okay, here's a house here with zinnias in, and I'm just going to zoom in. So zinnias will grow way into the season here. And this is November the 21st, so here we are in November. And here's a row of zinnias right at the fence.
Here's a home that's made out of concrete. Yes, made to look like brick. Unusual textures on the face of this. Look at this, 2 wooden teddy bears on the teeter-totter. The person definitely doesn't lack humor. Well, it looks like they lighted up the gazebo in the city park. I think you can see it from here. Here's an old home. It's been placed on the register of historic places. Doesn't give the name of it or who it belonged to. So I just have to keep it guessing. Well, this has been our little walking tour today of the Pioneer Women's Park and Railroad Museum. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. And again, as always, thank you for watching. Come back and see us again. Bye.